I keep telling you, it's the happiest place on earth here in the studio. It's Tuesday. I just got off of men's group. We have a men's group here in Carlsbad from 7:30 to 8:30 every Tuesday morning. If you're ever in the area, or if you're in the area right now and you've never come, you need to come and check it out. We go through the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day, and I follow up with this. I do the notes in the morning. I've been studying Proverbs for about 30 years, the corresponding proverb, corresponding day, meaning on August 6th, which is today, 2024, we are studying Proverbs 6. And it's amazing the wisdom that comes into play and how God's able to take his word that was written 3,000 years ago and apply it to our businesses, our lives, our relationships, every aspect. This has been something that I've heard over and over again in Proverbs, which is work your land. And it's a thing that I struggle with. I don't know if you guys struggle with it, but especially in today's society and times where there's comparison to everything. I had a sentence that we wrote out today that said, at blank point in my life, I didn't think that I would be dealing with blank. And imagine if you filled those things in. Right. And I think that most of the time it's because of comparison. But I find that when I start praising God for exactly where I'm at right now, like working my land right now, the land that he has given me, then opportunities tend to open up. I have the tendency to have more energy. So if you are experiencing a bit of exhaustion, you're a little bit weary, you got some anxiety, you got some depression, whatever it is, in today, right now, ask yourself, am I praising God for the land that he's given me, and am I working that land? It's so much easier to look at somebody else's land. It's so much easier to look at someone else's situation. But when we don't understand it in its entirety, that's where we get into challenge. And so, in Proverbs 6 today, it's little Inchstones, and we talk about these over and over again. And I want to emphasize this for you, is that most of the time people will tell you about milestones, these huge things, these huge audacious goals. It's good to be able to, think about those kind of things. But I think the biggest thing is to take our little Inchstones, those little things that you can put in place today. And that Inchstone today is to simply work your land. So we're going to hit Proverbs 6 today. Let's get this party started.
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day
I think our audio wasn't working on that one, so that's okay. I'm going to work my land exactly where I'm at. I guess we weren't supposed to show the video on there, and I apologize if that hurt your ears when we went through it. So in this Proverbs 6, as I went on a walk, and we got a new puppy, which we're loving. His name is Ziggy, and he's got tons of energy. He dive bombs every single person. And as I was on the walk this morning, just God kept telling me over and over again, work your land, work your land, work your land. And I'm like, okay, whatever it is. But it's amazing because every single time that I get exhausted, that I get weary, that I get worn down, most of the time, or almost every single time, it's because I'm trying to do something that I'm comparing myself to. I'm comparing myself to a time before. I'm comparing myself, my situation, to a place where, I didn't think I'd be in this place, or, that person has this. And so my brother and I, we had this conversation while we were in Lompoc, and we were walking down H Street. And as we were talking about it, he just helped me to realize that any time that comparison creeps in, joy is going to leave. And I believe that, and it's probably one of the hardest things to do, is that what God wants us to do is just work our land. And it's probably the most boring thing to do. It's not going to be super shiny. It's not going to be exciting. But what will happen is when you work your land, opportunities will open up. I have a friend named Tim Story, and he told me a story about his sister where she was working in a restaurant, and she was talking about all the things that she ultimately wanted to do. And he encouraged her just to work her land. And as she worked her land, being a waitress in that restaurant, she began to meet people that would open up different opportunities. But if she wasn't focused and doing the best that she could at the in the restaurant where she was at doing the waitressing job, which she wasn't that excited about, she wouldn't have had the doors open to her that would ultimately open up. And it's so easy for us to sit in the place where we're at right now and say, oh, if I only had this job, if I only had this marriage, if I only had these friends, if I only had this amount of money, then I'd be able to do X. But imagine this. Imagine if we just work our land, and that land will create endless energy. It's amazing because yesterday I worked my land. I did exactly what I was, God called me to do yesterday, which was amazing. I got to work with some clients, and it was great. I got done, and I came up here to the studio, and I saw a podcast that I had done yesterday. If you hadn't tuned into it, it was incredible. It was talking about coming down off of a high. It was from Proverbs 5. And when I was done with a full day of work, I walked up and looked at it, and I was like, I would love to be able to clip it all out and, make all the clips for social and things like that. And I found crazy amounts of energy to be able to do that, even though I had worked a full day, because it was exactly what God was having me to do at the time. He provided the energy. So if you're lacking energy, sometimes it's just that you might be doing something that you ain't supposed to be doing, and that's the reason why it's exhausting you. So let's hop right into this. In verse 1 through 5, it was pretty simple. In Proverbs 6, in working your land, it talked about that if you work your land, you'll stay out of debt. I find that most of my debt comes from, and this is not just financial debt, but it's personal, professional, spiritual, and financial debt, generally comes from me looking at somebody else or looking at somebody else's situation and thinking, oh, wow, I would love to have that, or I'd love to be in that place, and not working my land. I think one of the greatest examples of this is my friend Rick Burkholder, who is the vice president of sports medicine and performance for the Kansas City Chiefs. He works his land. Like he said that he is so engulfed in what it is that he's doing, and that they, on the Kansas City Chiefs, although, I'm a huge Titans fan and I'm a huge Oilers fan, and, but I'm so inspired by the Kansas City Chiefs because they simply work their land. They have their principles, they work their principles, and they shut out all the noise. And imagine if we could do that. And imagine if you could do that. And what will happen is that in that first one, in verse 1 through 5, it talks about that you'll stay out of debt personally, professionally, spiritually, and financially. And when you're not in debt, you don't have the monkey on your back, and you don't feel that you have to perform for something that doesn't really mean anything anyway. So work your land. In verse 6 through 8, it talks about little breaks, consistency, and diligence. And one of my buddies, Craig, in my men's group today said that the cost is little. And I said, well, explain that. He said the cost is little in every single thing. If you want to be the greatest athlete in the world, the cost is very little every single day. It's just little things, Inchstones, that you'll do every single day. He said, if you want to be the laziest, sloppiest person on the planet, the cost is little. Every single day, you just continue to be lazy, and over a course of time, you'll end up in that spot. But it's never a huge cost. So imagine this. I think a lot of times when we're wanting to move towards something, we think, oh, wow, it's going to cost all these things. But what it says in verse 6 through 8 is just working your land will create little breaks. Consistency will be the key. And diligence, which is right work, doing the right thing. How do we know what the right thing is? Staying in touch with our Creator and having God lead you in exactly what you're supposed to do, not the thing that you think you're supposed to do, but the thing that He'll have you to do at that time. In verse 9 through 11, it follows up with laziness. Now, laziness is not repairing yourself, is not taking time for yourself, is not those kind of things, but laziness is just not doing what you know you should be doing because God called you to do that thing. That laziness is trying to keep yourself busy so you don't have to work your land. What is your land? What is the thing that you've been blessed with right now that you can work that land? And when you do it, it's amazing the opportunities and the things that will come into play. Or sometimes it'll just mean that that land becomes so fertile that it begins to bless you exactly where you're at right now. Some of these things I didn't like to hear because once I become aware of them, then I have to acknowledge them. Once I acknowledge them, then I can start to aspire towards something. But if I never heard them or never became aware of them, then I don't have to worry about it. That's the reason why some of these things hurt when I read it, and I have to hear it and listen to it, become aware of it, acknowledge it, and then aspire towards it. In verse 12 through 15, it talks about this, like, do the right thing. Imagine that. Do the right thing, even when you don't want to, and even when you don't get the result that you want. Do the right thing. Because the right thing will always reap amazing results, not on the time that you want, not at the exact, in the exact clothing that you want, but it'll always work out. When you do the right thing, the right things will happen. But again, it won't happen on your time. It's God's will, it's his plan, and it's his timing. And that's the hardest thing, one of the hardest things to be able to do. But, doing the right thing in verse 12 through 15, not only doing the right thing is beneficial to you, but the people who are watching, there's always someone watching. You're a mentor to someone who you don't even know is watching. And imagine if you just do the right thing, it can have such an incredible impact on somebody. And I tell you, when you're doing the right thing, guess what? You're working your land. In verse 16 through 19, it talks about focus, truth, kindness, discretion, slow down, and honor. And one of my buddies told me, he said, anytime I get off of those things, that I'm focused, that I'm telling the truth, that I'm, expressing kindness, that I'm showing discretion, that I'm slowing down and taking thought of what I'm doing, and that I'm honoring not only the gifts that I have, but the land that has been provided for me and that I'm working that, he said, it's generally because of romance and or finance. I romanticize something in my life. I've fallen in love with that thing, and I romanticize it, or I'm doing it for the benefit of finance. And it was so telling. Kevin, I want to thank you, Kevin Kennedy, in our men's group today. He talked about that, and he just said romance and finance. And imagine this, when those two things are your motivator, most of the time, you're going to be outside of working your land. And it finishes up in verse 20 through 35. And, this one was comparison, right? So anytime you're comparing, you're not working your land. Or it's the gateway to not work your land. And when you're working your land, opportunities start to happen. The soil becomes fertile. The crops are amazing, but it's not on your time. I wrote this down as I was listening in our men's group, that adultery is serving anything or anyone else before God. And in verse 20 through 35, it talks about adultery, but not just the physical side, not just the, in a relationship, but it's putting anything above him. And what God wants you to do right now is that he has you exactly where you need to be at the exact right time. And all he wants you to do right now is to simply work your land. See, working your land has an incredible payoff, although the distractions of life will be more plentiful than the opportunities to stay on track. Keep it simple, work your land, and prosper. It's incredible because the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day for me has never, ever, ever disappointed. And when I get to a point where I shed comparison and I simply work my land, it's amazing what can happen. It'll help you to stay out of debt, get little breaks, have consistency, diligence, stay away from laziness, do the right thing, have focus, speak truth, have kindness, discretion, slowing down, having honor for things, and keeping me out of comparison, which will cause me to work my land. I invite you today to that the place, if you're exhausted, if you're weary, if you're in those areas, slow down, stop right now, and write them down. Write them down on a piece of paper and ask yourself, am I working my land, or am I working based off the comparison towards somebody else? And I invite you to simply work your land. Have a wonderful day. My name is Kelly Cardenas. This has been Inchstones, another episode. And make sure, if this is the first time on the podcast, make sure you subscribe, that you send a comment, and realize that our podcast, has many shows to it. So we have Inchstones, which is this one that we do today. We do the corresponding proverb, corresponding day. We really seek wisdom. We also have an interview show that I take some of the most iconic people in the world, and I have them give advice to my kids by name, and we dive into their stories. And then we have a show called You Have to Meet My Friends, where I go live and I call my friends randomly and, and have them on the show without them knowing, which is amazing. And we also have a live version of the podcast, which is called The Vibe Room, which is coming very, very soon. I want to thank you to all my friends out there, Mr. David Hamilton, Wayne Freeman, Baron Baptiste, Rob Cardenas, Nathaniel, Nate Hannaford, Will Simmons, Roy Tuscany, all of you who reached out to me because I sent out the production notes. If you want them, send me a message. I'll send you the production notes so you have them listed. I'll text them out to you or email them out to you, either way. So I want to thank you guys for supporting the podcast. I love you so much. My name is Kelly Cardenas, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
Nothing more on my mind. I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never know, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.